at the onset of the motion, that DCS, whatever the number was. Thank you. I appreciate you keeping me honest, because sometimes I do get lost in this paperwork. Okay, let's get back to the agenda. We're almost finished this evening, folks. Okay, notice of motions. I am going back to this, there it is, thick agenda, to page 637. I have a resolution in front of me. It's been moved by Councillor Wells and seconded by Councillor Brunton that council waive the rules of order to allow the consideration of a motion to reconsider respecting the holding tank rates. Discussion. Those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Those opposed? 1. So we have a 2/3 majority, which means it is carried. I have a number of possibilities here for us to consider. What are your wishes? Councillor Height?
Thanks, Mayor.
No, okay. My apologies. You may have a seat. Which one? No, that's the fees. That's the fees.
This one.
That's the fees. Okay, sorry, my apologies. This resolution has to be done before we can consider discussing the rates. I'll read it, and then I'll need a mover and seconder to continue this evening with this matter. That resolution number 18 of the council meeting of June 27th, 2017 be reconsidered. This is the reconsideration motion. That was the suspension of the rules. And we'll need a 2/3 on this. And further, that council recommend that option 4 with a waste hauling 40% subsidized blended rate of $20.29 per cubic meter be utilized for the 2018 rate-supported operating budget with an economic adjustment to be determined at that time. That is the motion from June 27th of this year that we are being asked now to reconsider. I will need a mover and seconder. Put it on the floor. Councillor Brunton has moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Height? We can discuss this. Mr. Clerk? Want to do it right. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just have to make sure. We had a notice of motion moved by Councillor Wells for reconsideration, and now we just had Councillor Brunton move it. How did you vote, Councillor Brunton, on this initial motion?
Back in June of
27,
this year,
because you might not be able to move it.
you voted in support or against this resolution for the rate to go to $20.29 per cubic meter? I remember how you voted, but it's your call. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. So this is legitimate. It can be debated. Reconsideration be debated?
The only, as per the procedural bylaw, the only thing that can be debated at this point is that the member moving the motion can briefly introduce it, if you so desire, Councillor Brunton. Otherwise, it's straight to a vote.
Do you wish to speak to it?
Be glad to speak to it. I have had a considerable amount of mail over the last few weeks, and I think that we have definitely got a problem with the new rate. It's 104% or whatever increase over the 2017 rate if we proceed. And I feel that we should perhaps try to lessen the blow, if I could use that word, and phase this in a little over a longer period of time. And that gives some of these people that have a concern with what we are trying to accomplish more time to, I use the word, make adjustments. So that's my concern, Your Worship.
I will call the question on reconsideration. We would need a two-thirds majority. We'll need 6 of 9 of the 9 to vote in favor of this. Those in favor? It's carried. Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, when a reconsideration occurs, we're required to deal with the motion that was initially passed. So that's the next order of business, is to deal with the June 27th motion before us right now.
So I do not need a mover seconder?
No,
I will
it's-
read the motion that was June 27th, 2017, and we'll vote to support it or not? Pardon? As if it wasn't passed.
As if it wasn't passed,
You
so
people have
it's,
the feeling I've never done this before?
it's
Okay, thank you for your guidance here, because if I do it wrong, he jumps all over me and I turn red and I get upset. Okay, so we do not need a mover and seconder to consider and vote on the motion of June 27th. I'll read it again. That council recommend option 4 with a waste hauling 40% subsidized blended rate of $20.29 per cubic meter be utilized for the 2018 rate-supported operating budget with an economic adjustment to be determined at that time. We are going to vote whether we support that this evening or not. Does anybody wish to debate this motion that was passed back in June? I'm going to have a show of hands that support this motion. Those in favor? Sorry? Yes. Yes. Yeah, we don't need two-thirds. That was only reconsideration. Those that support this motion? Support. Motion's defeated, so that's off the table. So now we're back to square one. Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I'll move the following motion, that we set the hauled waste rate to a rate of $10.10 per cubic meter for the 2018 rate-supported operating budget.
Can I get a seconder for that? Okay, Councillor Wells has seconded. Councillor Height. I will read it. Councillor Height has moved, Councillor Wells has seconded that the 2018 holding tank fees be set at a 1% increase from the rates charged in 2017, and that the change to the anticipated 2018 holding tank rates be funded as a variance out of the rate budget reserves, and further that the overall issue of holding tank rates along with 2019 rates be presented to the 2018/2022 term of council for further determination.
Could you ask the question of the treasurer?
Pardon?
Ask the question of the treasurer before you vote. Cut to the calculation. Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Find a way.
Just before I get to you, did you wish to speak, Mr. Treasurer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can make a suggestion to the motion to read that if you would like the $10 area for your motion, to read it as a 70% subsidy, of the established rate, and that would give you $10.12 per cubic meter.
I'm not following your line of thinking at all here. I'm sorry, I'm not suggesting it's wrong. 1% of $10 is 10 cents.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the full cost recovery rate for the holding tank waste is $33.73. If we were going to pass a motion to have anything other than the full cost to recover, to process the holding tank, if we can put the subsidized percentage in that motion, then it would help us going forward in presenting the rate budget in future years.
I see his rationale. Does it have to have a percentage in it, Mr. Treasurer, of our full cost recovery?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it could be council's wishes, obviously. However, if we put a percent subsidy in there, then it's transparent and clear on where that rate is coming from.
I'm not debating with you. That's not my job. Let me ask you this question, and I hope you still like me tomorrow morning. When this council when this council increased the rate in June from $6.34 a cubic meter to $10, was the subsidized rate included in that motion?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no.
Thank you, okay.
However,
I sometimes like to get my way. However, go ahead, I don't mean to be rude.
When we presented the report in June, we gave several options, and one of the options, as you just read, that was voted on back in June and passed, had the subsidized 40% subsidy in it. So therefore, going forward, if we can have whatever rate council decides on, to also have that subsidized percent in there, and that will help us with the rate models going forward in future years.
Councillor Hyde, I know you're hiding behind that screen on me, but I know you're there. Do you wish to include in your motion that it include the subsidy, which would not be $10.10, but $10.12?
Our treasurer drives a hard bargain, Mr. Mayor, and if the 70% discounted rate he feels needs to be reflected in there and to scoop up the extra 2 cents, I guess we could deal with that. So I'd be okay with those modifications.
Are you okay if I leave the 1% increase in? Rounded off, it's 1%. Do you want that removed from the motion?
Sorry, with a 1% for
That the 2018 holding tank fees be set at a 1% increase. I just want to be clear on,
Yes.
you're okay to leave that in? Okay, so you win and
Absolutely.
I win there on that. We'll see what council thinks. Okay. So we're going to add to the motion, Wells, if you're okay with this as seconder, that the subsidized rate for holding tanks be set at 1% for 2018, and that would put it at $10.12 per cubic meter. Okay, Councillor Black, to the motion, please, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Luke. And I know we started off this whole process with looking at the concept of full cost recovery. And we had a expert, person that was expert in doing and dealing with all the mathematics of figuring out what is exactly cost recovery for all the different areas. And in that report, it did say that holding tanks and septic tanks should be cost recovery like everybody else. So far, I believe this is the only one that isn't cost recovery. And I understand if you go full cost recovery that the cost will be a superior burden on everyone. I get that. But at the same time, if we're going to fulfill our obligation to all the rest of the ratepayers in fulfilling our initial mandate of looking at cost recovery, I believe that to be fair to this group, I think we should still be looking at cost recovery, but over a longer period of time. And it should be maybe over a 10-year period, but in that 10-year period, to go up incrementally until we reach full cost recovery. So that's the sort of thing that I would support, but this, I can't. It's not going to work in terms of fulfilling our policy and being fair to all the other ratepayers throughout Norfolk County who are subsidizing this. I do have a question, or did have a question I wanted to ask the treasurer, but I've forgotten it, so I'll have to come back to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Height. Oh, I'm sorry, I had your hand up. I had Black. Sorry, I had Oliver. You're not Oliver.
Thank
You're
Mr.
Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am Oliver. Nice to meet your acquaintance.
Thank you. My apologies, Councillor Height.
I have two questions on this. I think I heard my colleague say in his motion, the hauled waste rate. And to me, that's different than the holding tank waste rate. What was the intent, if I could get clarification on that, first of all?
Holding tank.
Okay, that's good. I support that. Because obviously, our septic tank hauled waste property owners have been paying $33 per cubic meter for some time. And even at the proposed rate of $20, they were going to be getting a substantial reduction. So I'm glad he only was referring to. I was still confused, though, Mr. Mayor, in the proposed rates in Schedule A in the bylaw, it still showed septic tank at 33, and I'm not sure whether that's what staff meant or not, but that's for later. I share some of Councillor Black's concerns. I think the intent eventually was to have a blended rate, and in 2018 that had been proposed as $20.26, which again for the septic tank property owners was going to be a substantial reduction. For the holding tank property owners, it was going to be a substantial increase. And I didn't vote for it back in June, and I still don't support that $20 increase for those, or that new fee. But I do support more than a 1% increase, I'm sorry. I think eventually we have to get to a cost recovery rate. And I support the idea of phasing something in over a period of 5 or possibly 10 years, that it could go up by $2 per year over the next 5 years as an alternative. It ultimately is still going to hurt holding tank property owners. We know that. It's going to phase that in over a longer period of time than being hit with it all at once. So I don't support the motion that's on the floor. Depending on what happens with it, Mr. Mayor, we may have something else that would be another attempt at a more reasonable approach. Thanks.
Thank you. Columbus and then Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we know how much this, if we raised it 1% to 10.12, what kind of impact would that have on the rate budget that was put forward a couple weeks ago? What's the difference in dollars that would have to be made up by the other water and waste ratepayers?
Mr. Johnson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So if we were to go to the $10.12 per cubic meter, it would increase the rates for the rest of the users in the rate model that we use.
Mr. Columbus?
But do we know how much? The other day it was, I think 98,000 or something. 96,000 or 9,600? Okay. What would the economic value of that be, Mr. Johnson?
So the revenue that we had in the budget with the $20.26 was approximately $200,000 that we would generate. So if you were to, very high level figures, if you were to split that down to $10.12, then we would have to put that $100,000 on the rest of the users of the system.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Brunton, please.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I had these figures from Kathy last week. That's what I'm referring to here. But, my original motion, I think, we said we need to phase this problem in. And I think these people that are here tonight have to realize that we can help them. We can tell them that we can haul it for nothing or take it for nothing. But we got a whole raft of other people out there that are gonna be on the phone in the morning condemning us for what we're doing because they're making up the difference. You have to understand that part of it. So my point is this, if I would like to see this thing, Councillor Black's correct, we got to get it up to what is a non-subsidized rate, I guess we'll use that word. And I'm prepared, and I'm 12 cents, I'm sorry, Councillor, it just isn't enough for me to work it to a non-subsidized rate. So if we have 10,000 cubic meters, I'm going to say, at holding tank rate, and we added $2 to that rate, that would bring it up to about $12 at this time. That's going to add another $20,000, if I'm correct, am I on that, to the holding tank rate. So that leaves about $80,000, if I'm correct, James, that has to be distributed to the water and wastewater users. And I think if we, and I think it's a compromise. $2 from 30, that puts it at $12 from $33. I don't think that's out of line. And I guess that's where I'm coming from, Your Worship. $2 to me is fair at this time.
Councillor Height, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The council will recall several years ago when the consultant's report came forward, they recommended a 7-year phase-in. At that point, we decided not to do that, and here we are today. Damage control. That's what we get. Now, you know, the rate-supported budget is a user-pay system. It's supposed to be fair and equitable, okay? All the residential customers that we have experienced a 1% increase. So I know it's a small amount of money, that 10 cents, but it's a 1% increase, fair and equitable. Same across the board for all of our users. Will there be a shortage on the revenue side? Absolutely. We made that decision 2 years ago. Okay, if we're going to talk math, figure in all the mathematical aspects of this, which we've gone over so many times, one of the things we're missing is Norfolk County, we pay for hauled waste. We have public washrooms. Is that in the equation? How much we're going to gouge ourselves, as it were, to remove the hauled waste from all of our portable toilets out there? You know, we know one thing. We've turned things around in the water and wastewater side of the house, and we've experienced a surplus last year. I believe it was $500,000 in both of those categories. There is some room in there. We've changed those rates, and it's made things move around. Finally, we're on the right path. For me, the 1% works. I feel it's equitable across the board for all of our customers. Next year, we'll be going over this again, and if we need another study done, I'm sure that we have the formula at this point, and we could modify it slightly instead of bringing in a consultant and look at the whole proposal again. We know that our asset management plan has changed our capital forecast. Therefore, that should change the rates, but the AMP isn't really quite up to date as of yet. So that could change things around, shift, give us a better picture in the future. And for what, we're talking 10 cents? The reason it actually is more to the user, it only appears like it's 10 cents per pump out. It's not. It's actually, there's 9 cubic meters in each pump out. So it's basically 90 cents. So that's your 1%, $10.90. Roughly a little more because of the 12 cents extra that the treasurer got me on, Mr. Mayor. So that's my comments.
Thank you. Councillor Black, do you wish to speak again? Second time.
I did have a question, and it was, maybe it's through you to Lee. Are there other systems that you can get off the holding tank and onto something cheaper? Are there new systems designed that would be cheaper in the long run?
Through the mayor to council, as I'm sure council has heard me say multiple times, if you write me a big enough check, we can do anything we want. So the answer is yes, there most certainly are. There are septic systems out there that will treat to drinking water standards that releases that. Do I think it's affordable to have a system like that? Not likely for a private homeowner. At this point, it's extremely expensive, but there is everything in between, and really it's a cost-benefit analysis that everybody has to do. As with everything, there is your one version, and then there's the top-of-the-line version, and there's everything in between, so.
I have a few more speakers. I'm watching that clock, and we may have to go past 9 o'clock to wrap up this evening. Councillor Oliver, second time, please.
Mr. Mayor, this will be my last kick
That's
at the
fine.
can. My recollection from our special budget meeting of a couple of weeks ago was that staff pointed out, and I stand to be corrected, but if we had implemented this $20 and whatever cent a rate for the holding tank waste users for 2018, it was going to generate about $80,000 in additional revenue, plus or minus. I'm hopefully looking to Lee, and that was about right, I recall. Okay, so that, all right. And the other thing I want to remind council of is that we removed a $35,000 capital item from the budget. That was that software upgrade, which has been taken out of the 2018 capital rate budget, I should say. So in a sense, we've already accommodated a sizable chunk of what would be needed to reduce this increase for these folks, at least for 2018. So I'm not asking any questions, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to remind us of that. And should we go for a $2 increase instead of a 10, then you can translate that into $15,000 or $20,000 increased revenue rather than 80. That's all. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? Councillor Sonnenberg.
I won't be supporting this. I never have. I can't ask one group to subsidize another. Pay for the system you're on. I live in an 1,800 square foot house. I'm not happy with my property taxes. Am I supposed to ask someone who has a 1,200 square foot house to subsidize me? It's exactly what we're doing here. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the motion? Okay, you heard the motion. That'd be set at a 1% increase for 2017. That'd be funded out of the rate budget reserves. The holding tank rates, along with the 2019 rates, be presented the next term of council for further determination, and that the subsidized rate for holding tanks be set at 70% for 2018. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That is defeated. I am going to, before we continue, do a procedural bylaw to go beyond 9 o'clock. Can I get a mover? Councillor Geisens. Do I have a seconder? Oliver? Geisens has moved. Oliver has seconded. That notwithstanding the procedural bylaw, council proceed beyond the hour of 9 p.m. to finish the business before them. Councillor Wells to the motion? Yeah. That's all that's left other than the bylaw reading. One motion to do the bylaw and then the confirming. The rest of the business is done earlier. Those in favor to proceed beyond 9, thank you. Councillor Brunton.
Your Worship, certainly don't like the idea of it, but I'm going to make a recommendation that the 2018 holding tank rate be set at $12 for 2018.
$12 per cubic
Yeah.
meter.
And I hope these people, if I may speak to it,
I got to get a seconder, then you're the first one to speak. Do I have a seconder for the $12 rate? Councillor Oliver has seconded. Just before I read the motion, I know our treasurer will want the subsidized percent on it.
work it backwards. Work it backwards.
Mr. Johnson, could you calculate for me what the subsidy would be at a $12 rate, please? I'm in no rush.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I calculated already.
You did it already.
Well,
Did it in your head, go ahead.
Not in my head. So that would be a subsidized amount of 64.4%.
64.4%. I'm not going to read the whole motion. It's the same as the last one I read, only the rate is $12, and the subsidized amount would be 64.4%. Mr. Brunton, you have the floor.
Well, Your Worship, I'm not, and I realize it's another slight hardship for these people tonight, but they have to understand that we've got, I'm going to say 15 or 20,000 people on water and sewer rates that they are subsidizing. And nothing's fair. I live in the country. I don't get sidewalks, street lights, street sweeping. There's a lot of things I don't get. But I subsidize the people in town that do get it. So there's a lot of things that aren't fair, but I don't, and I think if we do a $2 raise this year, and the people understand that it's going to happen again maybe next year, I don't know what that might be, but when we set the rates, you know, we'd like to get it to a non-subsidized rate. And whether it's fair or not, I think it is, and I'm prepared to stand by it. Thank you.
Councillor Black, please.
I don't know if, what I would like to see is something that says, here's what the rates will be over a 5-year period, a 7-year period, a 10-year period, until we achieve cost recovery. I'd like to see that. And I see the treasurer's hand up. Maybe he has a comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Black. Every year, we basically redo the rate model, and it's based on consumption, whatever expenses we have for that particular year, whatever new initiatives that we may need. So it changes every year. So it's hard to come up with exact rates for over a 5-year period. So the reason why I'm pushing the subsidized percentage is because that's a tool that you can use to phase it in. So for example, we're at 64.4%. Perhaps for 2019, we can drop it down to 60 or 55 and so on and so forth, and use that as a tool eventually to get full cost recovery.
Okay, so what you're saying is you don't really need to do that right now. It's just, I know in my mind, I would like to achieve cost recovery. So I don't know exactly how much that would be each year, but $2 this year, you're saying that we can just continue to do that every year without the need for knowing exactly, you know, what it's going to be every year for 5 years, 7 years, or 10 years.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I recommend that every time we have a rate budget review with council, that we can provide a schedule of the rates at that particular point in time with the phase out of the subsidy, and then you can make an educated decision. Okay.
Well, after hearing the sage advice from our treasurer, even though he is like way younger than me, I got to support the recommendation.
Anyone else? You've heard the motion, and it is to increase 2018 from $10 to $12 per cubic meter, and that's a 64.4% subsidy. No other discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. I want to just make a comment why I don't support it. I'll give you these. Back in 2016, our holding tank residents were paying $6.34 a cubic meter. We have now, in 3 years, increased their rates by 92%. I say to you, I don't believe under any circumstances we would do that to our urban ratepayers on our septic systems. I don't believe that would happen for a moment. And that's my feelings on this. Thank you, Mr. Clerk, for all your work. I now will go to our bylaws. Which one's that?
So this one here will be 134.
I will need a mover and seconder for the bylaws. Black has moved. Wells has seconded. That bylaws 59Z 2017 and bylaws 2017-126 to 2017-134 inclusive be passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and fixed with a corporate seal. Those in favor? Yes.
There's another one here too, this one. No, the
Go ahead.
ones are eliminated.
They're out. There's one more coming, so those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
The next one's a Scott one, because we had it anyways.
So what?
The next one's a Scott one, because we had it anyways.
This bylaw deals with the application from Scott's in Delhi. Mover? Geisen, seconded by Columbus. The bylaw 13OP 2017 and 58Z 2017 having been published in the December 12th, 2017 agenda be passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and affixed with the corporate seal. Those in favor? That's carried. I have one more confirming bylaw, please.
And Mr. Mayor, just before we confirm.
Yes.
I'd just like to note, I've got some revised agendas for the special meeting, because there's another item on it, what Mr. Yakov wanted to discuss
Will you hand
is
that
on
out
it.
on the way out?
And I'll hand it out on the way out. And also, we're going to add the rate budget that was, the bylaw that we just pulled from passing tonight. That will also be passed on at this meeting.
Thursday.
So it's not on this agenda, but it will be presented at that meeting.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Height. Make sure you get that agenda, please, before you leave. Seconded by Wells. Bylaw 2017-136, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of Norfolk County be passed, signed by the mayor and clerk, and affixed with our corporate seal. Those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Merry Christmas, and we'll see you Thursday at 3 o'clock.